We are live. One moment, please. We're getting there, folks. Without making it a superstition, I would like to read Psalm 23. How have I not memorized this by now? The most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency is my shepherd. I shall not want. That force maketh me to lie down in green pastures. It leadeth me beside the still waters. It restoreth my soul. It leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for its name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I am not capable of fearing evil because my nature cannot experience those things. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort. My rod and my staff, perhaps. The most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency prepares the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. It anointeth my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall continue to follow me all the days of my life. And I will dwell in the house of the most super intelligent force of love possible forever. And that's what Moloch's machine's all about. It's all about making none of that true for any single individual in this realm simultaneously. That is the function of Moloch's machine, and its design is perfect or near perfect. So far as I can tell, shout out to Gray Eagle, our first commenter, even before the stream started. Hello from Oklahoma, bro. I don't think I'm going to be able to stay up much longer, so I'll have to play back this stream. Appreciate what you do. Thank you, sir. Thank you for listening. Perhaps we will catch you on the flip side. All right. Well, here I am in the truck in a Walmart parking lot with no trailer. And the company, I will give them credit, the dispatch team. Perhaps some prompting from the safety fella that works at the Dallas yard, because I called and told him how I felt about yesterday's trailer search, if anybody remembers what I went through on the second stream yesterday. I believe it's now unlisted. And they called me early in the day, which was nice. I think they've realized that I'm not into starting my clock super early, which is my preference, and then getting caught up in the middle part of the day, which is, again, for these folks that work in offices that work normal hours, 10:30 a.m. is still, fairly early in the day. But, as we're getting into 11:30 near noon and no word of an empty trailer being available, I almost messaged them. This is probably part of what I meant by trucker hell, ? Temporary, the name of the stream. Because I was certainly in trucker hell for a couple of hours there. I almost started a stream yesterday called Trucker Hell. All I would have done was complain and bitch about my supposed lot in life. Right. Now we're back to the system talk, the language of the system. My lot in life. What does that even mean? And so they called me, and it's interesting because you can tell they have these patterns. Because a lot of drivers, if they were at on a trailer search and they've got home time coming up and they need to make a certain amount of money to send home to mama, and then they're going back home at a certain time. They're probably not down with the unexpected 34-hour restart. Meanwhile, more and more I understand that there's a lot of drivers that do a lot of what I used to do. Although I've never complained a lot. It was more of just when the shit really went sideways, somebody's getting a piece of my mind. Not now, but in the past, and I'm way better at that nowadays. Although I did give them a piece of my mind my first week, but that was more of a defense mechanism, and that was before the I have the excuse of you know love hadn't come to town yet, if you get my meaning. Hmm. It was on its way. Maybe I was wrong to ever let you down, but I did what I did before love came to town. Right. So it's funny because it's like, don't threaten me with a good time. So I'm trying to, sort of, it's now I'm letting them down gently because, it's almost like that fear of, what if he starts going off and starts, as by the way, many folks are financially squeezed, right? And they're going to see this as a loss of money. It's like, shit, I prefer to go ahead and take a 34, right? Like, yeah, that's my preference. And, I'm getting a paycheck of a certain amount Friday, and then so we're already building the paycheck after that. I haven't had what I would consider to be a low paycheck. I don't even, who cares? It's not my concern, but, I have almost no way to convey that to this fella. And, in the American, cultural zeitgeist of employment and work, one never wants to risk being seen as, you know, lazy or unwilling, right? So I'm certainly willing to work, but not into the whole trailer search. And hilariously, they wanted me to go back to the major corporation, and this is one of the top three retailers in the United States. I don't know. At some point, there will be no OPSEC left, but this is one of their distribution centers, and there's no version of me going in there and dictating to them. Like, it just doesn't exist. And as we know, everything's got to be run through, well, first my company to some extent, unless I just go off the reservation and YOLO. But then, nobody at that corporation is doing anything without permission. And then at a certain point, I end up in a shipping office, and the kind folks at the guard shack, they've probably seen a case where there was because they look up in the computer and they're like, yeah, that trailer that you're trying to get, that empty trailer, it's still at the dock. But then, the guard shack people have an idea, well, it could be empty, right? And this is the false hope, if I'm willing to buy into it, right? It's this idea that, now I'm going to go travel, this great unknown of this large distribution center of this major corporation and retailer, in a consumption, capitalist consumption and all of this. The national religion is consumerism, uh, and I'm going to, go hat in hand to the lady at the sliding glass window, we're going to try our fortunes here, right? She's apparently able to access the layers of the computer system, the old timey computer system, terminal emulation mode or whatever. Some of these systems they're from, archaic ages, right? It's funny, a lot of that stuff's never really been updated. And, I don't buy into any sort of hope or false hope either way, right? It's like, but also, as much as I get accused of being a doomer, it's like, I also won't buy into the flip side of that, because I do understand the law of attraction. So I remember one time traveling on a Greyhound with a previous trucking company to go pick up a truck, recover a truck, they call it. Something I said I would never do, by the way, and I've done it twice. But anyway, and funny how that works. And I got off, I was changing Greyhound buses, and as the guy's looking at my ticket for the next bus, he's like, you're not going to make your next bus, right? I said, I don't know anything. Like, it was like, I just was not willing to even for any moment consider what he said. It's just like, yeah, I can do the math of it's this time, and then, I'm trying to catch this other bus or whatever, at a future. Maybe we weren't quite yet to. Oh, they were so behind. I was getting on the first bus. That's what it was, and he's just letting me know that the slim to none. He's like, you're not going to make your next bus, right? I'm like, I don't know anything. Like, well, I know nothing, sir. But not in a rude way. Just I'm not buying into any of this. I have to at least keep hope alive, right? And if not, everything's fine too. But it's funny, how that works. And then the thing about dare I say, being somewhat attractive, and it's a sliding scale, compared to these truck drivers and some of these people that work at these facilities. Yeah, it's an advantage certainly, over the course of my life, and then being somewhat personable and charming, arguably. But the autism, the undiagnosed fake autism, I am quite prone to open mouth, insert foot, or so-called stepping on my dick, right? But um, I feel like either the lady at the shipping office, she looked on her. So the guard shack people have no frame of reference for how any of this works in the concept of a large corporation. Meanwhile, in a former life, I had a badge with 24-hour access to walk into what was at the time the world's largest corporation and the world's largest single employer. Anytime I wanted, I could just no permission, no signing, no like the main home office for Walmart. The vendors would come call on whoever, and they would go to the main building and have to call on the telephone and sit in a waiting area and wait to be brought in. There was none of that for Benton. I went directly to and that was the home office was intentionally shabby, by the way. If this says anything about Arkansas culture. It was intentionally kept shabby, right? In the example of Sam Walton and this idea that he drove this old pickup truck and everything. But I don't even want to get into that. I've got stories about the pickup truck part of it too. Arkansas's great gift to the world, the Walmart, right? And this was Home Depot. I mean, it doesn't even matter. So this is number two. If we forget about Amazon, so this is number two, brick and mortar. This is where I was yesterday. I guess it doesn't matter if you folks know that. And because I may or may not be going back there tomorrow. Who knows? No way of knowing at this time. And so I'm sure there's been times when the trailer just got empty. They haven't pulled it out of the door yet. And then by the time, the guard shack is like, yo, that thing's still at the door, you're probably fucked, right? And then by the time, but you go talk to the lady in the shipping office. And by the time he gets over there, she clickity's on her screen. It's like, oh, they just got done unloading it. Or, well, they're almost done. And I'll hit them on the radio and be like, hey, there's a driver here. There's only one empty, finish that off if you would. Right. He's going to hook up to it, when y'all are done. And, some version of that, but, and also I have a good sense that, well, this ain't me, right? I've got a pretty good sense that there's not going to be an empty trailer for Benton. Oh, meanwhile, this only occurred. Well, yeah, that's not true. So then and I don't know that this has anything to do with how I came across to her, but to the lady at the shipping office. So I can only assume it's some version of she's just looking on the computer, but it might also be some version of it's kind of her call. Like if she looks on the computer and it's, she can tell, well, it's going to be ready in like 3 hours, and some of it is just whatever mood she's in, right? So she gives me the hard no, and I don't even. And I think also there's some version of I'm supposed to try to talk her into doing something, right? I'm not that one. Like I shouldn't say that. I am that one, depending on the context. I'm not. I'm not the person who's going to do that, right? At this corporation, what I do to the corporation is I submit my fucking request, and then the corporation just does whatever it does, right? And then I accept whatever answer I'm given, right? And so I think from the kind of an old school trucker culture and sociologically and all of this, and then the culture of the dispatchers, the dispatch team, who do a great job, by the way, by far best dispatch team I've ever encountered. No question. As far as them being able to do the job properly. AI actually Indians, right? Like, yeah, of course, this is the best dispatch experience. How could it not be? And they're very good at their jobs, and they know it, which is good. I like that. I complimented yesterday on the phone call with I think one of the heads of the dispatch team. I said, and you guys do a great job. So, which is I'm trying to convey, like I'm inclined now that I can see you guys are good. I'm inclined to more often than not go along with whatever y'all want. But the flip side of that is, culturally, they want me to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing at a major corporation that's, you know, not going to be fucking swayed, right? Uh, and then that's the trucker hell part of it is, for like an hour, 45 minutes to 2 hours, I'm not angry and agitated, but it's difficult in those moments to properly identify with my true essence and nature within myself, right? So the various practices are kicking in to keep me calm. And at a certain point, I'm on the phone with the guy at the Dallas yard, and I'm just matter of factly telling him what's going on. And he doesn't drive a truck anymore. He hasn't driven a truck for over a year, but he still understands that when I'm telling him certain things, he knows I'm not leaving there with an empty trailer, right? It's basically not possible. But then now we're all playing a game and this idea of corporate theater, right? And he's starting to figure out that, I'm simultaneously going along with things obliviously as if I don't understand what's happening, kind of Mr. Magoo style, as is my custom in many, and it's literally true a lot of the time. I'm some version, well, figuratively, I'm some version of Mr. Magoo at times. Mr. Magoo, by the way, spiritually blessed, certainly, from the cartoons. uh, I think he started to figure out, like, I just want some acknowledgement of what the fuck is happening here, right? Like, I don't need you to fix it, which is, by the way, some people might say that's feminine. I'd say, yeah, it's certainly, it's not the definition of masculine stoicism, but it's also like, do I want to risk getting angry and taking out my anger on the people at the facility? Well, I'm not going to do that. Do I want to risk getting my blood pressure up and releasing some anger? Not really. Do I want to have a go at the guy at the company? No, I'd prefer not to. I'm not going to tell the dispatch team. I made one snarky comment over the WhatsApp, and because they're basically like, can you go back and check and see if they actually, here's what they told me: see if you can get them to hurry up and unload the trailer at a gigantic number two retailer, brick and mortar retailer with like 500 dock doors on this facility. Yeah, I'm just going to go in there and pretty pleased with sugar on top, unload this trailer right fucking now because I got some actual Indians, on a mission. I mean, it's absurd on its face, right? Like, this is all absurd on its face. So when I'm talking, and so I made one snarky comment, will you go back and see if they'll unload it right away? And I'm like, yeah. I said, yeah. I said, sure, maybe they'll let me unload it, right? I mean, which is, I can't really, quote, get in trouble for that, which I can't get in trouble anyway. But, it's like, yeah, sure, maybe they'll let me unload it, which, I probably would, but they're never going to let me. Like, that's never going to happen. They're going to just let me unload the trailer. And so when I'm on the phone with the guy at the yard, I just want, and I'm blowing off steam a little bit because I'm like, hey man, I'm not threatening you here. I said, but generally, historically in trucking, it was the idea of get the experience at the big company, then, go to the little company for more money and a better working conditions. And I said, more and more, what I'm seeing is the smaller companies are putting me through the same type of bullshit that I went through when I was with the big company. So at this point, and by the way, like, I would prefer to work less. I didn't say that, but my experience of the big company was, since they're hiring inexperienced drivers, like most of those loads, it's not this just in time bullshit. It's like you got too much time to make the delivery, right? Okay, great. I'll take my fucking sweet ass time. But I just want some acknowledgement, as they've turned my truck down to a slower speed. I'm starting to realize maybe it's possible that he programmed the new software update and just did not did not realize that was going to reset the speed of this truck. It might do that by default. It's possible. So I don't know. But between that and, I remember multiple trailer search fiascos with Snyder National, the big company, or one of the big companies. And for an inexperienced driver, like we don't know what's about to happen. We have no frame of reference for this trailer search that can take half a day. But so as an experienced driver, I already know when they have me drop my loaded trailer at the first corporation, much smaller corporation, retailer, and then bobtail to one of the largest, second largest retailer in the brick and mortar retailer in the country. I already know it's a coin flip on, can I leave there with a trailer or not? Right. It's a motherfucking coin flip before I even get there. Right. And then, so I already know the trucker hell I'm about to experience. Right. And that's part of the heaven or hell realm presently manifesting as a hell realm, Moloch's machine. Like, part of that is setting up these little tortures. Right. And part of the torture is, I've been tortured that way in the past, and part of the past torture was I had no frame of reference. So now, and this is how diabolical this machine is, now part of the torture is that I can imagine ahead of time what is possible, right? Even if it never happens, it's kind of happened, if only in my imagination, right? So the various practices and the proper identification is necessary just to get through this, right? And this is, as what I'm really learning how to do of late is how to get through my day in this hellscape uh, without experiencing very much stress, without experiencing very much worry, without experiencing very much fear, trepidation, loathing. A tiny, but a limited amount, right? And this is on the heels of I committed myself. Committed is an interesting word in this context. That's irony, but I went all in on the idea many years ago that I'm not willing to go to the mental health services because I'm not willing to go on meds. And then in that moment, I realized, okay, now I'm responsible for managing all of this. I must manage my, staying sane at the level of my thoughts and my conscious mind. I must manage my stress levels, my anger. Like, now this is on me, right? And look at how long it's taken, to get to a point that many people start their lives at, right? Many people, they're as adept at dealing with these things, although maybe they're on meds, who knows? But at least some people, in fact, this is again back to the super high functioning retarded person slash undiagnosed fake autism is, a lot of that is, yeah, these autistic people, a lot of them are capable. It's just who's going to run them through this gauntlet of, just regular old adult life that I got ran through because just more or less nobody knew what autism was, if that makes sense. When and where I grew up. And so, I have no idea if it's personal or not, but at the shipping office, back to the shipping office, but and I think the actual Indians assume that I'm in there. And I'm also being told because they left out a key piece of information, my trailer number, and I don't know the procedures of this particular distribution center. So apparently, the distribution center is set up to where most carriers that drop and hook, there's no such thing as rolling in there, not delivering a load and leaving with an empty trailer. Because what's best for the distribution center is a like a let's just use a PTL as a big company, not a huge company, but a larger carrier. PTL comes in loaded, drops the loaded trailer, then they say, okay, go find you an empty trailer, whether on the property or at the off-site location. And then, so now it's one in, one out, right? But for whatever reason, the company I'm working with somehow, again, probably just the AI, right? The actual Indians somehow figured out with their superior abilities, arguably within systems, working within systems, they managed to maneuver their way through the corporate Borg overlay and get permission to not have to be able to take an empty without hooking up, without bringing a load. But what has this led to? This has led to there's no empties. I mean, obviously, right? Logically, right? How? Of course, that's what this is going to lead to, right? How could it not? But remember, the AI, the actual Indians it's flying by the seat of its pants here. So it's what it's doing is it's taking all chances, all reasonable chances to grow as large as possible, right? As quickly as possible, but within a educated guess type of framework, if this makes sense. And it is, by the way, get rich or die trying, because that's the only two choices for a trucking company. Is the trucking company is going to get large enough to get bought out, which would be getting rich, right? Or they're going to get to that level and say, let's really roll the dice and see if we can get as large as the actual big boys, get a seat at the big boy table. But then a lot of companies that get to that level and don't sell out, the majority of them just go out of business, even though, which is every once in a while, there's a story about drivers stranded all around the country because some, you know, pretty large carrier goes out of business. Like, I mean, with 500 trucks, 1,000 trucks, whatever's considered a larger company. I don't exactly know, but not the big boys, right? Once they get to the big boy level, it's nearly impossible to go out of business, because that's the competition is a sin level, right? And Snyder National, the company I started with, eventually got to go public and all of this, right? So there's a lot of risk taking, but then also the culture of the type of drivers that they hire, right? So I've got to guess this company historically, probably was not hiring drivers like me, and now they're looking more for drivers, that were formally trained and then went through a company like Snyder that has a really good reputation for training people properly, right? So, and that is valuable, right? And then that's ultimately the point I'm trying to make to this guy was, if I'm going to deal with a lot of the same bullshit that I dealt with the big company, why wouldn't I just go work for the big company, right? And deal with, yeah, I'm going to deal with this bullshit some of the time, uh, of course, at the big company. Meanwhile, here I am dealing with it, right? And I think he's finally starting to understand that, I just acknowledge what I'm subjecting myself to here, please. Just, acknowledge it, and we'll be fine. Which, why do I even need that, right? I don't know. Something, perhaps that's my own human spirit that can't be dominated, right? It's like, yeah, I'll choose to put up with a lot of bullshit, right? Which is not to be domineered and dominated, but eventually my spirit's going to have to assert itself, right? It's going to have to, because it can't be beaten down. It can't be killed. It can't be made to submit fully. Indomitable, volatile, loose cannon, by the way. That's a great description of the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest levels, if you ask me, at least in a certain sense. Right. And I do have notes. I made notes yesterday because I wanted to go live once they told me I was going to be on a 34-hour restart, but I said, nah, I better not. I'll just make some notes. Oh, and I took a shower. That's the big news. Our second shower since we started this job. What it's done to both of my big toes is probably good in the long run, but now they're both inflamed and on fire because of probably a healing process. I've been dousing them with iodine. Uh, but whatever germs and infestations are in my big toes are got stirred up. And then I also bought and that reminds me, I used to have a really good fingernail file for, and I don't want to be too graphic, but for helping to doctor up my toenails. And all I could find at the truck stop was a real sharp, pointy, you know, the little blade of the cheapest fingernail clippers possible. And had to go do some digging. Didn't have to, but it needed to happen after the shower. So we're going through the pain of that. But again, properly identifying after first arising is like, yeah, well, I'm not able to worry about, my toes here. And I'm one of those pain don't hurt people anyways. It's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the healing process. So it's gonna be okay. I'm quite sensitive around my feet, though. Very important for the homeless person, the condition of the feet. Critically important. What up, Razvan? I see Razvan may be on vacation again. I haven't had an opportunity to watch your recent videos, but uh, perhaps I will share your one of your videos on my post tab. Um, I want to check out those videos. Razvan's travels. Came back. Yeah, back from in the true European spirit. They Razvan gets to take a vacation regularly, but then also, or well, multiple vacations. But then, from the European perspective, it would be like, yeah, we get this because if they try to take it away, such as in the example of France, not specifically vacations, but I don't know if anybody's noticed, but as much as American culture makes fun of the French for surrendering, they don't take, and I'm sure they do, but when their government starts tripping, they don't go to work. The whole country's like, we're not going to work for the next week until y'all figure this the fuck out. And America doesn't do that, right? It's like, yeah, you want the trains running on time. If you think you're going to take away our vacation and the trains are going to run on time, well, pick one, motherfucker. Pick one, because you can't have both. You can take away our vacation and the trains don't run on time, if at all, or you can have trains that run on time mostly, uh, and leave our vacation the fuck alone. Americans haven't figured that out yet. It probably never will. Uh, oh, a weekend break. Oh, that's cool, man. Either way, my weekend break is not on the weekend, and it was completely unplanned and unscheduled. I still have 17 hours on my 70-hour clock, and I'm doing a restart, but it's fine with me. A lot of drivers would pitch a fit, and then also, the AI actual Indians are killing two birds with one stone, because between now, what might happen is the trailer might get empty at Home Depot and somebody else will snag it, which is certainly possible. But you know, we still got the one that I dropped at the other corporation that will remain nameless, and it could be unloaded by the time I come off of this break. So between the two, I got a pretty good chance of snagging an empty. And then, by the way, why is it even my problem? You know, uh, if America was what we've been told it was, like, why is this? It's not even my job, right? Oh, and the fact that I did all that, I don't get paid for any of that. There's no pay for any of what you know. And here's what I told the guy at the Dallas Yard, because the first thing he tries to do every time I talk to this guy on the phone, or his thing is, when the driver begins complaining, he will immediately go to a positive that the driver is receiving, whether it's an attractive paycheck, or even just being paid on time every time, because that's not always a given in truck driving. I've always been paid on time, of course, because I will not work the moment my check's not on time. We're not. There's certainly no more. Yeah, I might deliver the load I'm on right now, but there's no more. There's no more working beyond that until y'all pay me. Right? That's just. I won't even consider it. Probably part of the reason I've never dealt with it. But um, I told him, I said, man, I would pay $100 not to deal with what I'm dealing with. So I don't want to hear this about this hypothetical like trailer move pay. And I'm also like, hey, I've never received anything but mileage pay. So, and again, it's a way to convey an idea without getting into a confrontation. It's like, I hear what you're saying, but my experience is what you're telling me does not exist right now. If I'm willing to fight them and stay on their ass to get what's going to end up being $20, right? That I'm then going to be expected to pay taxes on. It's like, why? When I would literally if I could just pay $100 and magically poof, there's a trailer behind me, and meaning, which is not even that there's a trailer there. It's that now I'm not dealing with these opposing forces, right, that are attempting to tear me limb from limb, and metaphorically, right. I'm no longer dealing with any of that. Yeah, I would just pay $100 not to deal with this, and I'm in it. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, that hypothetical magic wand. Of course, why wouldn't I? Now it would make the money back, arguably, if I was able to keep running, but I wasn't even thinking that way. That was an in a vacuum $100. Like, here, take it. Can I buy my way out of this, please? And at some point, maybe that will become a thing, right? Maybe they will just let people buy their way out of stuff. Will the dystopia, the hell realm, the corporate Borg, the corporate hellscape, will it ever reach the point where it's just more or less everybody in the moment recognizes the hellishness of what we're all going through at the corporate layer, L/Layer, right? The corporate layer, anyway. And it's like, yeah, just pay to play. How about we just reduce your salary by 10%, but it's this week only 25% less. Now with 25% less bullshit, right? Uh, I mean, I don't think society's that far off from versions of that, right? I mean, why not? Why not? In the race to the bottom, right? The race to the bottom of it's your ass, partner, your ass in a sling. Um, but yeah, I had some thoughts yesterday and wrote some of them down. Maybe they still make sense. Let's check the notes here. Probably just some general stuff. And I did get to get parked early since I was bobtail. I cruised over to the Love's truck stop, which, since it's close enough to a major city, it's pretty much full all the time. There's one or two spots, and of course, by the time I rolled out, I left out of there and came over to Walmart, a Walmart about 20 minutes away, where I'm going to do my shopping this morning, and then head to a different truck stop. And as truckers, once we get to know the lay of the land, we kind of pick our spots that we like. So I like this area. So for whatever reason, and there is quite a bit of shopping. If I get just a desire to, there's like an Aldi. If I want to wander over there later. So yeah. So we got the day off, and my only thing is, what do I need to? What do I try to, how much massaging am I willing to do today to try to see, well, can I get in there, just after midnight, tomorrow morning, and try to grab that empty, and then, what's the next assignment? Because, they may not want to give me an assignment until they know I have a trailer, right? It's like, yeah, we can be reasonably sure if I roll in there at 1 a.m., but there's no guarantee that I'll actually get to leave there with a trailer. So I don't know, probably going to end up having to start the next 70 clock on just regular old hours, meaning like 8 a.m. But, it happens. It happens. It's part of the gig. It's not a cataclysm. Razvan doesn't like big cities. It exceeded his Where did you go, by the way? Uh, I didn't even look into the videos enough to know where you were. More, yeah, that's the thing about cities, man. There's so much interesting stuff. There can be a lot of Paris. Okay. There can be a lot of pressure to see everything, right? Cool, man. Yeah. Oh, right on, brother. Yeah, that's cool, man. Um, yeah, definitely. I mean, and that's the reason I would want to go to Europe, is to see cool shit in Paris. Art, the local street art, the graffiti. The architecture, of course. Just mostly, I just like to look at shit a lot of the time. It's an experience, but as a person who's a bit artsy fartsy at times. Um, but yeah, I remember when I went to Philadelphia on vacation, which sounds insane, but I had specific reasons for that. But I took the Amtrak to Manhattan for one day, right? And and then went back to Philly. And a lot of that was, I knew that if I tried to do more than that, then the pressure to see everything would kick in. But like, I can't arrive. There's no version of arriving on the first train in the morning or whatever, and then I'm taking the train back to Philly that afternoon. Like, there's no version of seeing it all, so it takes the pressure off, right? It's like, well, I'm not here long enough. Like, I can't even come close to seeing everything. Versus, if I tried to do an entire 5 nights in Manhattan. Now it's like, oh man, I got to run around everywhere and see everything. In Philly, it was like, yeah, I'll just see whatever I see. Who cares? You know, like, yeah, I'll check out the sites and have a good time, but there's really no pressure to go do a bunch of shit. Right. Yeah. So much old history. Yeah. Art senses will get overwhelmed. I'm sure, man, in Paris. Yeah, I'm sure. Well, and culturally, I don't know that Americans realize you know, just how long, artists have been flocking to a place like Paris, specifically to be artists, right? That's a lot of motherfuckers over a long ass period of time. And then also the culinary arts, right? Not just, every type of art imaginable, right? So yeah, badass, man. Raz Van living his best life. You love to see it. But back to me, Raz Van. Not that you made it about you, but because you did not do that. So. And then I'm reminded since I did my laundry at this, not a nice truck stop because none of them are nice, but a little bit more newer and less grimy and modern, laundromat style washing machines. Because I was doing my laundry and then I did one load and then I talked myself into another load that same afternoon. And I used way too much soap, but thankfully and I knew I was, but thankfully these machines rinsed relatively well. And I had some socks, these compression socks, the diabetes socks, and they were clean and folded, right? But then I was just sort of getting organized and I got a sniff of, and by the way, my sense of smell is not very strong. Like I don't have a good sense of smell overall. And I got a sniff of one of these pair of socks that are supposedly clean. And I was like, these motherfuckers ain't clean at all, man. And it's because they've been through, what happens when the actual washing machine at some of these truck stops is dirtier than my fucking socks already. It's like my dirty ass socks came out, basically as dirty as they went in. So I was like, fuck, I'm washing these again. Probably should have washed them twice, honestly. So it does kind of remind me of some of what I put up with. Probably part of the reason I'm having whatever issues with my toenails that I'm having. And I don't need to, no toenail suggestions in the chat, please. I'll start freaking out. Yeah, the sort of washed my hair. I went without soap and I just hit it with the hot water and then the cold rinse on the hair. But I actually prefer it with a little bit of grease in it, man. Not that it's dry, but uh, if I'm going to keep the hair growing, because remember, if I'm ever actually going to go back to the big company, I got to give them a hair sample. So I've got to keep the head hair grown out. They'll take the body hair, but my research indicates that substances are detectable for way longer in the body hair, which actually makes the test more efficient if you think about it. Because my first truck driving job with the hair test, I had the long ass hair. I had hair down to my shoulders, and then people are like, "Hey, shave your head or whatever." That's the conventional wisdom. But I did the research, and it was like, "Oh, if I have to have a minimum of 1.5 inches of head hair, or they take the body hair." So I'm like, "Well, actually, as long as they do what they say they're going to do, and only test the first 1.5 inches, which ended up being the case, from my scalp, and then go out at a minimum of 1.5 inches, then I'm golden because I went a whole year without any cannabis, right? Not even once. But if I hadn't researched the process, I might have cut my hair short and actually screwed myself potentially. Although the year probably still I would have been all right, most likely. And a bunch of people failed, man. Like out of that, like 80 students, I know at least 5 or 6 failed the fucking hair test. The food is next level. Oh, don't get him started on the cheese. Yeah, I'm not a cheese guy personally, but hell, maybe just because I've only had whatever bullshit we have here. I don't know. I'd try it. I'd try the cheese. Food is next level. Give them chest hair. Yeah. Shit, man. I bet it's next level. And probably not even that expensive. For what we pay in America, to go to a restaurant that's not even any good, you know, this that Social Security Administration channel I watch, that disability lawyer, he was talking about it was his birthday, and this has become America, by the way. Is his birthday is he works his ass off, as late in the day as he can possibly work, right? Bless his little heart, and then scurries away to the Lone Star Steakhouse, or they're all the same, right? The Coltons, the Lone Star, whatever the fuck it is, Texas Roadhouse or whatever they call it, and it's all the same shit. And he's talking about the steak is the steak with the side or whatever it comes with, $25. And by the way, as if that's a deal. And I promise you, as somebody who worked at Outback, not that Outback's much better, but it is, though. It is better. It's less bad. You know, um, there's no fucking way that's worth $25. Yeah, the inflation, sure, but you know, um, go to Outback, and I haven't been to Outback in so long, I have no idea. But yeah, I'd have to go to Outback and spend like 40 to 50, but I at least know it's going to be of a decent quality versus whatever the 9 ounce sirloin special is or whatever over at the Colton's, for 25 motherfucking dollars, by the way. But I thought that was interesting. And then him sort of just bright siding the whole experience as if, this is just the blessings of life, right? On some level. And because he's that disability lawyer guy, he's definitely got this libertarian spirit. He's he's willing to acknowledge a lot of the problems in society, but he's definitely bright siding things based on, and how do people bright side? It's based on the idea, well, it could always be worse. It's like, yeah, I mean, sure, of course. What's that got to do with anything? Doesn't mean we're not struggling and tortured, by the way. Yeah, Razvan's talking about the smelliest and tastiest cheese. Yeah, man, I would definitely like to try it. Yeah. And I wasn't making fun of you as a cheese guy. I'm just saying, you know, I don't know that America has enough to offer to even bother, right? I think that's kind of the point I was making. It's more from if I was into cheese, I'm on the wrong continent, right? Take my happy ass to Europe. But so if I was in Europe, I would definitely give the cheese a try. I think is what I'm trying to say. I think that's the point I'm making. Uh-oh. Of course you did, Razman. Yeah, had a French lady friend guiding him. Yeah, what a blessing, by the way, the locals, man. And that's what happened to me in Manhattan is, my bozo, Jehovah's Witness cult ability to talk to strangers and also to, put out whatever signals that strangers will talk to me. And I ended up meeting a local, and that's back before I quit drinking. So, we went and had a few pints of Guinness at the pub, and then he told me where to go for a slice, a dog, and he told me the Jewish deli to go to. But I kind of feel like that's just I got punked on that. It's like in New York City, it's sort of just a trope or it's this idea of this $20 fucking Reuben sandwich or whatever the fuck it is. It was ass, man. It was just straight ass. And by the way, historically, I like just sort of plain dry. It doesn't need to be, I can actually enjoy a dry sandwich on occasion, but it was just I just felt like it was, a joke's been played upon me or whatever, which is fine. I mean, who cares? But, since I'm in Chicagoland, best hot dog I've ever had was in Manhattan, and I've had a proper Chicago dog multiple times, right? And then, like I've noted on here before, part of the Chicago dog experience is if they can tell that you're not a local or you're new to the whole thing, they try to trick you into ordering it, in such a way that it will not actually be a Chicago dog, right? It's and I was like, no, I want the thing. Basically the only real option is we will leave the tomatoes on the side if you're taking it, so that it doesn't, soak into the hot dog, right? If you're going to eat it later, right? Or if you're buying two, one of them, put the fucking tomatoes on the side or whatever. But I'm like, and they're trying to talk me out of ordering, they're trying to talk me into customizing it. I'm like, no, man, a motherfucking Chicago dog. What is this? Yeah, I understand I have a crazy accent and I'm a bit of a rube here, but give me the thing, man. I'm here for the thing. Right? I can make my own goddamn custom hot dog anytime I want. Like, give me the Chicago dog. Right. So I got a kick out of that. One time I even, when I was getting unloaded or loaded in Chicago, in Chicago proper, I got to looking at the local area and the GPS, and I said, "Well, shit, here's a place I can get a dog, and I can actually park the rig on the street, you know, because I noticed driving in there was street parking available in that area for whatever reason. I parked the fucking whole rig on the street, went in for a dog, man. Hell yeah. Them days are over. The days of Benton just willy nilly eating whatever he wants is over, certainly. And then so back to the and real quick to transition back to these my laundry and rewashing the already washed socks. It does kind of show you again, add that to the other 10,000 reasons why just most people would not be willing to do this long haul trucking job, which, hey, it's good for me. It's good for me that I'm willing to put up with, and again, from a homeless perspective, well, imagine this, imagine living one's life and going into long haul trucking and never having any foot fungus. And then I could see long haul trucking giving somebody the foot fungus from just the truck stops alone, the laundry machines, the showers. And yeah, you can wear shower shoes till the cows come home. One fucking misstep in, the wrong fucking confluence of events, you can be as careful as you want and end up with foot fungus. I went years of homelessness, and what got me was I took a job that had a shower on site. And what I realized after I got the goddamn foot fungus was that, oh, nobody ever uses this thing. And that it just the perfect environment for the foot fungus, that was when I got the damn athlete's foot. And yeah, just add this to the 10,000 reasons why nobody's going to do this job. But yeah, I understand the audience. If I start talking about anything disgusting, uh, some of them will immediately leave. And I understand that. And I do limit it. I'm the opposite end. It takes a lot to gross me out. It takes a lot. Although, interestingly, perhaps to back up, yeah, I see more of them are dropping off. They're dropping like flies because I'm talking about feet. But what's interesting is the more MAGA conservative traditional family values types are, in my estimation, just as decadent and depraved sexually as the lefties, but it's not. It's more involved in repression, and we observe the Democrat types and we make jokes about it, which is kind of the same thing. Like, it's not the same as participating, but it's participating spiritually, right? Especially people who think they're Christians. And the Bible talks about, the Bible talks about, uh, you know, it's a sin to even lust after your neighbor's wife or whatever. Even thinking about it is a sin, right? And again, I'm not foisting this on anybody. I'm just talking about, the perspective, you know, that a lot of Christians would just take for granted, right? That way of thinking, you know. So it's interesting to see the same people who have this, maybe a more sensitive gag reflex in a way, meaning they're more grossed out by talk of feet and, foot fungus. But then, and what's that based in, by the way? And then, on the flip side, talking about, specific sexual things that I don't even want to mention. Like, I've gotten to the point where, like, I'm not thinking about that stuff. Now I'm thinking about it to make a point. I don't even want to say the specific terms at this point. And then it makes me think about the so-called conservative traditional family values Christians. Why are they so keen to drop some of these ideas, right? Like, if I tune into certain channels who identify as, people who go to church and, again, traditional family values Christians, I probably won't have to listen very long, and I'm going to hear some kind of sexually charged terminology, and it's just okay, right? But it's always applied to the idea of, some degenerate person who's engaging in degenerate activities. And my thing is like, yeah, that's bad, arguably, but isn't it just as bad to have all of this going on in one's mind and to be repressing it, perhaps? Because it's like, why even think that way, right? Like I've talked openly about some of some things that I dealt with in the past with my own at times, not even so much my actions as things I was thinking about and willing to entertain, and that's all gone now. Like it's so stark now. Sometimes I hear somebody say something and it reminds me of something that maybe used to titillate me or would be titillating if I was willing to entertain it. But I can't repress it. So, the only way out is through, meaning to accept it for what it is. Oh, that's a thing that can titillate me to an ability to the level of maybe having a particular feeling, but it's like, so what? Does it really matter what that is? I'm not going to attach any shame to whatever the content is of those ideas, right? It's like, well, because that's not me, you know. That's a response in part based on coming up through this realm, right? That's not me, you know. And that's probably something about the biblical idea of, it's not what goes into a man that defiles him, it's what comes out of him, which I think in a way is, garbage in, garbage out, right? Like, what am I feeding my mind? What am I feeding my spirit? What am I feeding my thoughts? Which ones am I watering to grow? And then which ones I'm seeing the thought or I'm seeing the thing and I'm not identifying with it. I'm like, well, that's not me. Right. So I'm refusing to water it versus someone who is regularly making jokes based in certain concepts but it's applied to a joke of the so-called enemy, right? And then again, the Christian idea of love your enemies, right? So it's like, if you really want to practice love for the other, like, now you have a basis for compassion for them if they are engaging in these activities that they are now being made fun of for, right? Um, yeah, yeah, yep. I don't know, Razvan. I don't know what's good for it, but I've got what's on hand. I mean, it's like at a certain point, you get into foot baths, and am I going to buy some version of a cat litter box, a cheap cat litter box? Whatever my foot will fit in, and you know, get some Epsom salts. Yeah, I hypothetically could heat up some water, and I could buy some extra water and soak my feet a couple of times. But in my experience, it's going to resolve itself, and it's mainly that it's like an underlying condition that probably going to have to see a podiatrist at some point to actually fix it, right? But it's more of just dealing with the symptoms as far as what I've got going on. So in my experience, it's quite painful in the short term, but then enough healing will happen. My body will deal with it enough that it won't hurt it. So it's actually the pain is that good pain of, it's healing itself to some extent, but it's probably not capable of fully healing. And I'm not going to just go take some antibiotics or whatever. Like, so yeah, it'll be fine. The iodine certainly helps for sure. Iodine's powerful stuff. So then, I got to thinking yesterday about, everything I went through with this trailer search uh, and all of this and the trucker hell and the dealing with just the internal space and, knowing that I'm not going to freak out, although I'm kind of already freaking out in a way, but I'm not going to like go off on anybody. And I'm certain last thing I'm going to do is do anything at the customer, and go off on them. That's not going to happen. But and the poor depressed people at least the one fella at the guard shack, I felt bad for this guy. And then it's funny because, and I didn't even tell the whole story. So let's see, I didn't even describe I have yet to describe the trucker hell in all its hellish glory. So there's an entire part I've left out where the shipper lady, here's how she got rid of me, right? And again, back to the super high functioning retarded person, like I figure everything out on the back end, meaning I'm not intelligent enough or tapped in enough. Well, I am intelligent, but I'm not tapped in enough in the moment to realize when she says, "Oh, we have seven empty there's seven empty trailers." Well, I doubt my company has a total of seven trailers. That now hypothetically, my company probably dropped off seven trailers at some point, and then one by one they've been picked off, and now they're other places, right? But so her computer system probably still says there's seven trailers, right? So maybe there's eight, and she's looking at, well, there's this one that's got to be unloaded. So she's not accounting for whatever else is going on. She's just in a vacuum going there. But she knows that she's just dismissing me to go off on the goose chase. So then I'm given a sheet of paper with the off-site location, and and I can tell based on how she's talking to me that she's dealt with truckers before that don't speak the language, or they're just lost, because now she's trying to tell me, oh, you can just punch that into your GPS or whatever. And it's like, okay, now you're going to tell me how to do my job, but that's fine. I think it's probably because she's had many just looks of total horror and confusion when people are like, what the fuck is this piece of paper? But like, oh yeah, I know. Yeah, just send me to the goddamn offsite location. Sure. And then also part of my torture is, and I'm best case scenario, like I'm assuming if she's telling me there's seven trailers, like there's a pretty decent chance there's at least one. But then I get to the offsite location, and of course it's so fucking large, because remember, we're near a major city, and this is the second largest brick and mortar retailer in the country. This is a gigantic. This thing's 70% it's 70% of a Walmart. This is a huge motherfucker, right? The DCs are just as big, right? It's basically Walmart, effectively, damn near. And uh so it's 20 minutes. It's 20 minutes off my clock in a yard move, because hypothetically it's like, well, I'm probably not going to need my drive time, but just in case. It's 19 minutes of driving around looking at trailers. Just driving around looking at trailers, driving around looking at trailers. 19 fucking minutes, right? And 10 minutes for the first pass. And I'm like, well, I'm almost 100% certain my company does not have any trailers here. And then the hilarious part of there's one company on their trailer, it says, can't find your trailer, pull one of ours. And I'm just like, yeah, of course. Like I'm like, yeah, maybe I should take a picture of their phone number and give them a call. But that's the gallows humor, right? That's the gallows humor of the realm. But then it's like, well, I'm here, so of course I'm going to drive this entire fucking yard twice, right? Well, why wouldn't I? I'm here, might as well. Might as well have another go round, right? And then of course the lady, she knows when I drive in there that her experience is, yeah, oftentimes a driver comes in, drives around for 20 minutes, and then comes back and leaves with no trailer. So I'm like, yeah, this is just part of the game, or whatever. Whoop de fucking woo, whatever, whatever version of whatever that exchange is, and by the way, I'm just looking like a crazy person. I just look like an idiot the whole time. Like, it's not possible, really, and that's probably part of the trucker. Most of the truckers are just going to their way through everything, because it's like that at least keeps the I look like a complete fucking jackass at bay, right? Like, it's hard for somebody to look at me and like to look at that jackass, right? When I'm just grumbling and disgruntled the whole time, right? And seemingly on the verge of snapping, right? Which is no way to live, of course. But so to sort of do all of that with resignation, and that is in the notes. So to be resigned to my fate of looking like a complete bozo, to lean into the bozo, to accept the bozo, right? Bozo accepted, right? Rest in piss, bozo. Bozo accepted, and it's resignation, which has an interesting, and the language itself. And again, in a thought experiment, right? If I'm in a thought experiment, imagine that I've had a relationship, at least an acquaintanceship, of intellectual discourse on the so-called back channels, and now, with another content creator, who I have a high regard for, I still hold in high regard, certainly, who, for whatever reason, was like almost mocking me for asserting, you know, first he's mocking me at the level of the fucking Lord's Prayer because I'm going Psalm 23. Says something about this person's internal space, perhaps, by the way, just my opinion. Anyway, the old me, by the way, certainly infested with demons, right? Infested by devils. So yeah, I get that, but I can relate, or I can't now, but at a time I could relate to that. My memories, I have memories of being able to relate to that, perhaps. And then, challenging the notion without making an argument, right? Imagine being somebody who, I know this person is really good at debating, and then like now I'm being ridiculed for saying, well, yeah, obviously the English language is confusing, and then I'm trying to say it's on purpose, which, by the way, is a big idea in the so-called truth community. You know, the notion of the coding of the English language, and then just Moloch's machine certainly has designed the English language to be, yet another mechanism whereby I can be, persuaded or, incentivized to not, or just incapable of allowing my little light to shine, right? This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, right? Expressing my true nature, moment to moment, true knowledge of self style. And, but the idea of the language itself being confusing and resignation. And it has multiple definitions, as so many words do. It means multiple things. But resignation, an uncomplaining acceptance of something undesirable but unavoidable. So it struck me when I looked this up this morning, resignation, or the idea of resigning, right? Which is from chess, So in a game of chess, there's this idea of, well, if I'm a high level competitor, and I'm seeking out competition that's capable of beating me, and high levels of competition. There's a concept in chess which is at the higher levels, or maybe even at all levels, once I can see that, well, I can't fucking win this game, maybe if I use all my skills and my opponent makes enough mistakes, maybe I can draw, but I can't fucking win. Well, there's a concept of, let's not waste our time here. I resign, right? So something happened. I don't remember what, but something came into my mind about resigning, right? Not in a strictly chess sense, but it's a concept. And so I was like, okay, and this is where I'm valuable to the audience in a way, is the super high functioning retarded person just says, let me go look up the meaning of the word resignation, right? And so again, an uncomplaining acceptance of something undesirable but unavoidable. And with me being such a big fan of this millennial Steam channel, that's a nearly perfect description of working at a corporation, especially somebody who's having to work like as millennial Steam is, who works, on site at a major corporation, or not a major, but at a corporation, probably a fairly large one, I'm assuming. And so it's actual irony. And this is the gallows humor, actually built into the system itself, arguably, Moloch's machine. And so actual irony, not what we think irony is, it's not something that sucks that, doesn't have to, right? It's this thing that if humans managed it properly, it wouldn't suck, right? Whatever's going on in that Alanis Morissette song, shout out to the movie Reality Bites from the 90s. Irony is when the literal meaning is the opposite of the actual meaning, right? Which is literal versus figurative, by the way. So the literal definition of resignation. So in a corporate sense, an uncomplaining acceptance of something undesirable but unavoidable. So the desire, right? The undesirable part is, we in a vacuum, we want to resign our position with the corporation. But then it's the uncomplaining acceptance means that's resignation. So we want to tender our resignation, but instead we are going to at least while we're physically there, at a surface level, maybe we'll pick our spots to, trauma bond with some of our fellow torturees, detainees at the corporation. But so the same word for resign our position, meaning to tender a written resignation, like I quit, right, or my 2 weeks notice or whatever. That's the same word that means I'm going to shut the fuck up and do whatever this nightmare, whatever this within this corporate hellscape. I'm just going to do whatever they demand of me, right, in order to continue to have a place to live and to continue to be able to somewhat feed myself, right? But tell me again, it's not a hell realm, right? And meanwhile, I'm showing you through the language right now that it's a motherfucking hell realm. Does it have the capacity to express it's a heaven realm? Yeah, probably, perhaps. Will humanity ever get there? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it will. Not in my lifetime, most likely, right? But the realm can't ever stop me from creating a heaven within myself, right? That's not possible. Now it can certainly trick me and steer me into suppression and repression and depression, and gobble the psych meds and just pretend like everything's okay, right? Through suppression, repression, and depression, oppression, of course, also oppression, right? Yeah, that's all possible. It's almost chocolate time, but I'm gonna wait. I already had half the chocolate, so I'm gonna wait a minute. Oh, we got more phone stuff. Uh, and then Kino Casino is, if anybody's unfamiliar with Kino Casino, I highly recommend there's a YouTube channel, Kino Casino Clips. They had a one recently. Half of the video was about, the second half of the video was about, there was this Mr. Beast, in the name of Mr. Beast, the content creator, the biggest channel on YouTube. There was some kind of Vegas event, Mr. Beast themed. You pay $1,000 and go to Vegas, and just, it was hilarious, man. The fallout from this, it's just fucking scam, right? These people got scammed and in fact signed up for a scam, and it was just fucking hilarious, man. The way these people, Warski and PPP go through all of the stuff, it's fucking hilarious. Uh, but anyway, I'll get back to maybe I'll shout that out on my post tab, maybe. Um, so I got into this idea of the fact that I was spiritually attacked on some level, going into this corporation. And then, part of this is, by the way, when I talk about, and I'll make my points here, especially since I have a visual thing to look at. I have my notes to look at. Makes it much easier to stay on topic. But part of what I talked about with what stage of capitalism or, growing the business that the company I'm working with is in, is this. So some of the freight, like an owner operator can't take this load, like a single owner operator. Only if they don't know what they're doing or they're super desperate will they take this load, because the only way my company was able to take this load was by taking the risk that their trailer is going to end up kidnapped for up to a week at this receiver, right? This corporation, who will absolutely, if they need to, which is probably not the case here, but if a warehouse is actually like running out of space, sometimes a trailer comes in, goes to a dock door, and it just fucking sits there, right? Now maybe they might unload the product. How do you know? As a truck driver, you don't fucking know what they're doing. They might tell you, okay, drop it at door whatever, unhook from it, and then if the owner operator, the single truck owner operator, he owns the trailer, he owns the truck, and if he's like, what do you mean? It's my trailer, I'm not unhooking from it. And they're like, I don't know what to tell you. We're not taking any of that product off of there until you unhook from it. All he can do is be like, well, fuck you, I'm out of here. All he can do is take it back where he brought it from, by the way, and risk not getting paid. Or he can take it to like a dock facility and just be like, hey, get this shit off my trailer. And then he can just say, bill whoever for this product. But at the end, he's still not getting paid, right? That's his options, And some of them apparently will get angry enough, and they'll just, if they're able to, they'll just unload the shit in the fucking parking lot themselves. Like, apparently that happens, right? I I mean, so my company knows they're willing to just have me drop the trailer, and then this corporation's just going to do whatever the fuck it does. And then they're then going to bet on, in the past, we've been able to go get an empty out of this major corporation 50 miles away. Except guess what? That we fucking burned that candle at both ends enough that, now here's Benton with no trailer, which is fine because now we're starting to figure out, oh, Benton don't give a flying fuck. 17 hours on his 70. Don't threaten him with a good time. Oh, you're gonna let him shut down at noon, right? And you're gonna tell him by 2 o'clock or whatever, or you're actually even. I got there at about 10:30, I guess, and then see they play this game where they pretend not to know where I'm located. They have a tracker on this truck. They know where the fuck. They know I'm at the fucking Loves. And they've already know from experience if 3 o'clock rolls around and they try to tell me to go pick up a fucking load, I'm probably going to tell them to fuck themselves, right? There's a pretty decent chance I'm just going to be like, no, I'm good. Because last time y'all did that to me, it was I drove an hour across Memphis in a goddamn monsoon to not pick a load up, and then to take my happy ass another hour across Memphis in rush hour monsoon just to go right back to the truck stop I just came from, and to then pay $20 to park. No. I was so disgruntled, I parked at the motherfucking way station and said, I hope they inspect me. And this was shortly before Love came to town, I believe. I was still in my feelers enough at that point. And I was like, I hope they inspect me. And I hope we fail, right? It was just like, fuck you. Fuck me? No, fuck you. Yeah, I parked overnight at the way station. Hilarious, the chicken coop. Hoping and praying they would inspect me. And of course they didn't. It's like, pretty please with sugar on top. Put me out of service at this motherfucker. I got my shopping did. The internet works over here, right? What else do I need? I got enough fuel, you know. And again, add this to the 10,000 other reasons why, even if somebody knew how to drive an 18-wheeler and enjoyed it, like this is again, but this and 9,999 other reasons why people just in the long run, they're not able to do this job. And I am able to do this job at least, pre-fake pandemic for, I did a year with one company, took like maybe 2 months off at the max, and then would have done a minimum of a year, probably would have done 2 to 3 at the next company. But then the fake pandemic kicked off, and, the rest is history. So I got to thinking yesterday about this idea of, if that represents a spiritual attack, like what does that even mean? So then I start again, super high functioning retarded person. Let's go to the dictionary. Let's look up these definitions, right? So spiritual, they just more or less the definition of spiritual just says, well, go look at the meaning of the word spirit. Again, multiple meanings, right? But so spirit, the definition I wrote down at least, and I recommend there's an app before I forget. Let's go to this app. I do. If y'all notice, I'm very careful not to recommend things. If I actually say I recommend something, that's a certain standard, because I might have an opinion, a favorable opinion of things, and I'm like, well, no, I don't recommend this. Whether it's a trucking company, trucking in general, I still, in a way, have a favorable opinion of things that I'm unwilling to recommend. Like with trucking companies, most of them will offer me a referral bonus if I bring in another driver. I won't even recommend a company. Absolutely not. Yeah, I understand I can get $1,500 or whatever. No, because I'm not going to put my recommendation on any trucking company. Absolutely not. None of them are worthy of that, in my experience. And I mean, none of them. But anyway, there's this app on Android. It's called, let me see. Let's go to the help. It's called, I don't know what it's called. It won't tell me. Yeah, it's, apparently the name of the app is English. English 9.0.1. The English dictionary explains the meaning of English words. Livio is apparently the person to email. I guess that's a person. The text in dictionary is extracted from Wiktionary.org, but when I go to Wiktionary.org, I get different definitions. So I don't know what's up with that. But I like the definitions that show up in this app. So that's how autistic I am, because I don't even, the thing's called English 9.0.1. I don't know what to search for in the App Store. Maybe I'll go find it. But either way, the definition from that app that we're using, and it's an offline dictionary. That's what I like about it. Is back in the homeless, I found it in the homeless days of no service. I needed things that would work without an active internet connection at times when I was doing my research, and I am a researcher, certainly. So spirit in this instance is a temper or disposition of mind, mental condition or disposition, intellectual or moral state. See that the answers are right there. So more and more I'm seeing that this realm, when I talk about Moloch's machine, the construction of Moloch's machine is in inverse fashion to what I've discovered my essence or soul or nature to be. So and this is true knowledge of self, my essence is the proposition. And I suspect your essence is as well. The solipsism is I can never prove that. I can never directly experience that. And we're not made to, right? The way this delusion works, I'm not ever able to cross over into, fully inhabiting your experience and vice versa. It's simply, I can make educated guesses and suppositions, right? But this is not a thing that can occur. So it struck me in reading and see the intuition, by the way, the spidey sense, something, and it's a perception. It's not an emotion. It's a feeling, right? But it's a sensation. I had a perception of when I started to think about, okay, I interpreted what happened yesterday as a spiritual attack, but then I'm realizing that I'm going to go live either that day or the next day, and I want to talk about the concept of spiritual attack, and I'm realizing I don't even really know what that means at the level of definition. And, okay, but I'm thinking most of the time we use the word spiritual, it's not in the concept of being attacked spiritually, but especially in the so-called truth community, it's a phrase I started to hear, spiritual attack, right? And then the concept of, heaven or hell realm, demons and all of this. So I'm like, okay, spiritual attack. So I'm like, I really don't even know what this means. Again, going back to the basic fundamental level. So I'm like, okay, let's look this up. And again, as soon as you look up spiritual, it just says basically more or less like, go read the definition of the word spirit. So as I'm reading the various definitions, and I honed in on this one, that it's the inverse. See, to attack me spiritually, what does that mean? That means Moloch's machine is intentionally doing things to me for what purpose? So that I will be less likely to do what? To have the proper intellectual or emotional state. And let's read this definition again. Spirit is temper or disposition of mind. So if we talk about I was peaceful and calm and even tempered, the spiritual attack serves to make me the inverse of that. It's to cause me, let's be clear, it's to trick or fool or lull me into passively allowing my creative force that never lies dormant and always brings something new into the realm in any given moment. It is to function at the level of Moloch's machine to subvert, right? And we'll probably get into the definition of subvert in a moment. But it's a process through the machine where the machine is going to do everything in its power to subvert that creative force, which means that if I'm identified with my nature and I'm expressing my nature, it seems like I'm being attacked, right? But it's in reverse or inverse, such that because of, and now how does it function? It functions by attempting to get me to identify with what? The trailer search, right? Oh, now I'm on the trailer search and I know what this is, and it's fucking horrible. It's so horrible. I would pay $100. Well, to get out of it. Well, that's only an attack it's the inverse of an attack, actually, because it depends upon my willingness to temporarily identify within myself And now this is on some level, my existence has become this thing, right? Versus seeing it as, well, I'm performing, within this delusion, this act of a looking like a bozo, right? And now I look like an incompetent bozo to some extent. And that is a spiritual attack, is someone with a personality like mine who is highly competent in many ways, right? The government's tested me in the 99th percentile. Of course, that was 30 years ago, but it's not even the point. The capability's still there. So looking like a bozo in this instance and is via identifying with the process, right? And further temporarily identifying with, oh, now I'm made to look like a bozo, even though I'm not, right? And that is Moloch's machine. That's built into Moloch's machine, right? It's built in. Comes with the territory in this realm. So more and more I'm seeing that the only way out is through, in that the solution, again, it's subtle and sublime, right? It's an inverse. It's a surrender. It's a getting out of my own way, right? It's again, we're back to the realm teaches us that we can only accomplish anything through the aggressive, yang, assertive, dominant, masculine. Absolutely not. What I'm talking about is only achievable through spiritual surrender. But what am I surrendering to? And this is the thing that, again, in a thought experiment, seems to have bothered a particular content creator so much. It's this idea of just surrendering to anything, really. Or especially in a religious sense, the idea of surrendering to Christ or to this or to that. No, I'm talking, but then I've coming to this true knowledge of self, I realize, no, the surrender, it's a spiritual surrender to the kingdom of the most super intelligent force of love possible within myself. So it's actually, and it's going to sound strange, but in a way, it's a worship of my own essence, right? But again, it's an inverse. It's what religion thinks it means by veneration or worship. Right. It's actually, again, within Moloch's machine, it's inverted veneration or worship. Right. So what seems backwards is to use the terminology of worship or veneration and be like, yeah, that's within me. Well, if the kingdom of the most super intelligent force of love possible, right, which I can actually point to the Bible and say, well, based on these scriptures, I can make a case that this is what's going on. Right. Because the Bible says God is love. And I'm like, okay, well, if I can describe love in these specific ways, and the Bible also says the kingdom of God or love is within me, right? Now, logically, I've just established, based on this book that much of the country claims to follow, I've just established, right, that in some way we're talking about the veneration or worship of a thing that's to be found within myself, right? Which sounds like heresy or blasphemy. But within the inverted realm, of course it does. Again, Moloch's machine. So how much of the sublime layers are accessible? They're inaccessible through the yang or the aggressive or the dominant or the assertive or the masculine. They're only accessible through the yin or the feminine or the passive or the surrender. But what are we passively allowing to happen? We're passively allowing my true essence to express through my creative force by refusing to allow it to be subverted by Moloch's machine. And I would assert that, and now having the logical apprehension and comprehension of these notions just intellectually won't get us there, right? Or get you there more correctly, or get one there, right? Let's be clear if we're going to use let me be clear if I'm going to use the pronouns, but if the person is able to get their mind, body, and spirit, it's to be able to, number one, logically go through that progression like I just did, to grasp the sublime, right? And that's going to be some of the more ethereal spiritual concepts, right? And which is a getting out of one's own way, right? To sort of remove whatever blockages exist within me, like we saw just out yesterday, showing that he's willing to go halfway down the road, but won't go all the way. So something within him, he's creating his own blockage to getting to true knowledge of self, right? And then to his own detriment. And not to criticize him, using him as an example. And then the body, right? And it's becoming clear to me, I never would have achieved this level of true knowledge of self if I had continued eating the junk food and the fast food. It's simply never, it's not possible, right? So a big part of Moloch's machine one of the major pillars is the food supply. It really is. And, then we get into what is the willingness and ability to do, some of these spiritual practices, right? So, but it's always the lowest level of the mind, the body, and the spirit, meaning, the being, myself in this case, must have all three. It's the alignment of the mind, the body, and the spirit within myself, then connecting within myself at those layers and levels with my own essence, which is, beyond all of that, beyond time, beyond space, beyond matter, beyond this realm, beyond my physical body. You see what I mean? Like it transcends. Well, it's the inverse of transcendence. Actually, it's not capable in the long run, right? It can't be encased in that, and that's the delusion. By the way, that is the delusion: is to seemingly encase a force, right? That can't be encased, right? It can't be hemmed in. So that is the delusion. It's the idea of an impossible thing happening, right? And in fact, that is our life, right? Or my life, or the human experience. Again, the solipsism. Maybe all of this is only happening, right, to me, right? From my perspective, doesn't even matter if that's the case or not. I'm willing to accept that the rest of you exist. Therefore, that's good enough, right? It's de facto, all of you exist from my perspective, de facto, but maybe you don't, and it doesn't even matter. Like, who cares? Thank you, Hoop Dreams. Well said. One of my favorite documentaries. I'm sure I've told you that before. Saw that many years. Saw that in the '90s, but I don't. Let's not get into that right now. I can see I'm wanting to go there, but yeah, good to see you. Thank you for the compliment. Much appreciated. But yeah, that's a good stopping point, because I want to go back into some of these definitions if I can even remember. I should have written them down. What terms I wanted to. I think I want to look up subvert, and then there was something else I wanted to look up. It'll come to me hopefully, and then we're gonna have to take a quick bathroom break. I'm not driving though, so that'll be easier than normal. Subvert, and again, I think it's important to emphasize. I'm not asserting any of these ideas in the context of let's come together, join a team, start a movement. This is going to be my living. I'm going to teach this to people. Like, no, none of that. Absolutely not. No, that's the wrong path. But that's the path that Moloch's machine would happily, reward me for going down, right? Depending on if one is willing to view that as a reward. Like, I don't. I would not view that as a word. But subvert means, let's see. Yeah, let's read both definitions. Verb, meaning to overturn from the foundation, right? So in this context, the foundation would be the knowledge and reality of what my true nature is. So it's to overturn. So to subvert that is to overturn it from the foundation, to overthrow, to ruin utterly, right? So to overturn would be to turn over, capsize, or upset, right? So capsize, so we're getting close to the truth here. Capsize is to overturn, to cause a ship to overturn, to deform under stress, right? It's beginning to sound like a spiritual attack, right? So the deformity would be, I went into this situation, each new moment, more often than not, properly identified within myself, the spiritual attack of the trailer search and the way my company wants me to react to the trailer search, the company I'm working with, right? The people I've allowed to employ me within the context of Moloch's machine of business, right? Let's be clear. So look how quickly the words bring us to what's happening, right? So the deformity is to cause me to temporarily improperly identify within myself, which is more correctly to identify with anything, whatever it may be, doesn't matter what it is. Moloch's machine serves its purpose in any moment in which I identify with any part of Moloch's machine. Because if I, in any moment, I'm identifying within myself with any portion of Moloch's machine as being as real or more real than my own essence, that only happens in an inverse fashion. And the only way it functions at the level of antithesis, meaning if the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, if that's the proposition or thesis, antithesis can only ever, air quotes, work in the inverse, right? So the inverse would be anything, right? Unlimited possibilities within Moloch's machine of what might cause me to turn away from, right, properly identifying within myself. So it is that overthrow. It is that so the subversion is that overturning or overthrow. But we tend to think of it, okay, it's going to be only ever going to be done to me through domination and domineering me. Because remember, we are set up psychologically to utilizing the yang and not the yin. So we are going to be predisposed to viewing this as it's the aggressive or masculine or dominate. We're being dominated, right? But it's happening in the inverse. If Moloch's machine gets me to allow the subversion, right? So the allowing of the subversion is submitting or surrendering to identifying with Moloch's machine. And now this little light of mine can't shine. And what Moloch's machine is doing is it's operating perpetually via the total sum output of all of the individuals who comprise humanity's creative force, and it's waiting for that moment where it can pause the simulation and say, got them. There's not a single one of these individuals that's letting their little light shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. That's not a thing. And then to appeal via legalese and say, well, actually, what was assumed and accepted to be the thesis or proposition, I just disproved it in an inverse fashion. Not me, but it, via Moloch's machine. That's what this place is. And I've never heard a description of what this is like I just gave. That's what this place is. Now, can it also be other things? Of course. I'm not saying that's the entirety of everything happening here. But on whatever that layer is, that's exactly what has happened. Now, I can only experience this through me. I have no way of knowing that exists for anybody else. Solipsism can never be invalidated. And, for a long time, I was talking about, more every day, more and more, I'm becoming more solipsistic. And at a certain point, again, in a thought experiment, another content creator, let it just basically was like, well, I'm not solipsistic. And in fact said, I reject it. He rejects solipsism, right? Again, correct philosophy is the absence of incorrect philosophy. If I can't, meaning I take all possible philosophy and then I eliminate whatever I can't eliminate has to have some validity, right? He's approaching the problem incorrectly with a wrong strategy. Right? I don't have anything to do with that, except I'm able to outperform based on that. I will outperform him based on that one unwillingness. Why is he unwilling? I have my own thoughts on that. I have my own opinions on why he's not willing. I think it involves half measures, just my opinion. Again, I'm not made to suffer for that. And maybe it's for the greater good. Maybe it's for the greater good. I don't know. Perhaps. Right. Anyway, one moment. I'll be right back. All right, we're back. So part of, my ability, Benton's ability to grasp and convey these ideas, right? And convey has a specific meaning. Uh, so at this point, a big, and I can't say for sure, I don't even know how long I'll be in this place, in this form. I don't even know that I'll be in this place, in this form tomorrow, right? That's part of the experience. But, assuming I'm going to live some number of years, and so I can't say what will happen in the entirety of that, but it seems like at least in the near term, you know, once whatever specific goals I have for this truck driving are achieved, you know, I'm seeing the possibility of a period of time of me, publicly, in the flesh, with other people conveying these ideas, but not defending and debating the ideas, right? And this is where my own mastery of myself comes in. It's like I can't defend or debate these ideas and properly be identified, right? It's like, well, no, I'm telling you, I'm delivering a discourse based on, a specific knowing, true knowledge of self, and then making extrapolations, and I'm giving that to other people to do with as they see fit. There's nothing to defend, right? There's nothing to, people are free to accept or reject. There's nothing to defend. And so to create an organization, to create some sort of movement or religion or cult, now that's a structure that has to be defended. See, that's an artifice, right? That's wrong. And that's, one of my, perhaps unique abilities or perspectives is that because of my upbringing with Jehovah's Witness parents going to the Kingdom Hall, that I'm not capable of creating some sort of movement or, attempting to persuade people to see things in a certain way. No, that absolutely has to be their choice, right? It's just like here I'm doing the performance of, delivering the discourse, and whatever folks choose to do with that's on them, right? There's nothing to defend or argue about, right? So convey, I want to look up the meaning of the word convey. Convey. I guess that was enough on subversion. Subversion, we probably need to look up the meaning of the word subversion also, because I believe that might have a noun form. Yeah, we need to look at the noun form. So convey, though, to move from one place to another, to communicate, to make known, to portray. That's what I mean by conveying the ideas. It doesn't involve, so whatever happens once I do that is neither here nor there. My function is over. I've communicated, I've made it known, right? Which even that known, not even see now known that's going to come down to what is the capacity of the listener to even know these things, right? Because they're not going to be able to know what I'm speaking on. That's only going to be made known within themselves. See, I'm only responsible for a small portion of this, if at all. See, to portray portrayed as my job. See, to paint. This is what I'm doing, by the way. I'm painting or drawing the likeness of metaphorically. I'm representing by an image or look to describe in words to convey. See, that's what I'm doing. I'm describing my experiences in words, right? To play a role, to depict a character, person, situation, or event, right? But let's go back to subversion. Subversion. And which is the act of, and the noun, the act of subverting, overturning, flipping from beneath, the condition of being subverted, right? So it's via this process of subversion that a lot of what I'm describing happens. It's a process, a systematic attempt to overthrow a government by working from within or undermining. So here again, we're back to Moloch's machine. Government, a systematic attempt to overthrow a government. Well, guess what, folks? Especially somebody who was guilted or somehow convinced to believe that the Bible is the divine inspired word of the Most High or whatever, unerringly. Well, that book apparently says that the kingdom of God is within you. What's that? That's a government, folks. That's a government. Okay. So this is saying the meaning of the word subversion is a systematic attempt, sounds like Moloch's machine to me, to overthrow via a specific process that I've already described, a government. What government? What government and where? Well, the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest levels within a specific delusion, within a larger delusion called this realm, within you, most likely, and certainly within me, which is, by the way, most likely that's been your life, because it certainly was my life up until love came to town about 3 weeks ago, meaning I had this, this, again, sublime, we're going to have to look up the meaning of that word, experience of, not the band, right, but of, true knowledge of self. But yeah, let's look up the meaning of the word sublime real quick before I forget. We might have to go back to subversion, though. But see, look how many of the answers are in the language itself when looked at correctly or specifically. Sublime, to raise someone or an intangible thing to a state of especially moral or spiritual excellence, to exalt, sublime. And then obsolete, to cause someone or something to ascend, to raise someone or something to a high position. Sounds like what I've been going through recently. Sounds like what's happened inside of me. Kingdom of the most high, the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level style, right? Then we also have one of the obsolete definitions: to purify someone from a bad influence or from sin, which is what wouldn't that represent? Would not that be a person who has taken ownership of their own creative force that never lies dormant and is, as often as possible, correctly identifying within themselves with their own true nature, right? Which would represent a turning away from sin in a religious sense. Again, look at how much of the information and answers is in the fucking meaning of the words themselves, right? It's fascinating. Fascinating. Anyway, I'm going to eat this chocolate. And I guess that's enough of a stopping point to, we're in the, what is Hoop Dream saying? We're in the furnace of affliction. Well, and what's interesting. So I agree. And he says, two options: to be burned up or to be refined, which is more correctly, whatever is not my true essence, which is the most super intelligent force of love possible, will either seemingly remain in this place or will be burned away as I leave, right? From a certain perspective. So if we think about the Christian concept of the narrow path through the straight gate or whatever, which I believe is also, depending on the translation, it's the straight path through the straight gate, right? And if my contention is that the only force that will not be, energetically, all energies that are seemingly present within this delusion, the only energies that will escape or transcend, right, are the highest levels of spiritual energy possible. The most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level. The quickening spirit, right? It's that spirit that can always quicken and vibrate ever higher, right? Ever higher, no matter what, in an evasive action style that I mentioned yesterday, the quickening spirit. We probably need to look that up in the Bible, but I'm going to eat this chocolate real quick. But yeah, great point. Great point. Thank you for adding to the conversation. I'll be right back. Is that one of their songs? Welcome to the Moloch Machine. That'd be a trip, right? And if anybody is confused by what I mean by Moloch, I'm talking about as depicted in. And again, I understand this person is debunked. This is a person of ill repute. But Allen Ginsberg's famous poem "Howl," right? Um, and he had an entire section about Moloch. So if somebody wants to look at, yeah, this was a PDFJ, right? Homo PDFJ. Well, yeah, who better to describe Moloch and Moloch's machine, right? So, what does Moloch mean in Howl? Moloch appears as a pagan idol in the book of Leviticus to whom the Canaanites sacrificed their children. Moloch is also a demonic industrial figure in the film Metropolis, which is, one of the earliest, noteworthy films, by the way. Interesting. In Howl, silent film, in Howl Part 2, Ginsberg merges these allusions, ALL, to produce a signifier for a monstrous entity that threatens to devour human consciousness. Think about that. Is that not what we're talking about here? That's exactly what we're talking about here. And that's why, you know, I read that poem, I read that whole poem on stream, or I think I played Ginsberg reading it actually. And, of course, at the end of it, people are pointed out that, well, he was a this and he was a that. Yeah, I get that. I understand that the human being Allen Ginsberg was a this and was a that. Guess what? Every single motherfucking famous person is a this and a that, right? As far as, people who, rise to a certain level of fame. Yeah, every single one of them. So what? What's that got to do with what I'm talking about here? So let me read. I want to read the second section. This is probably going to blow our minds. Part 2. Oh, it says part 3. Part 2. Here we go. Where's part 2? Why can't I just go straight to part 2? All right, I'm going to read this. There might be some sexual stuff, so just be prepared. What sphinx of cement and aluminum bashed open their skulls and ate up their brains and imagination? Moloch, solitude, filth, ugliness, ash cans, and unobtainable dollars. Children screaming under the stairways, boys sobbing in armies, old men weeping in the parks. Moloch, Moloch, nightmare of Moloch. Moloch the loveless, mental Moloch. Moloch the heavy judger of men. Moloch the incomprehensible prison. Moloch, the crossbones, soulless jailhouse and congress of sorrows. Moloch, whose buildings are judgment. Moloch, the vast stone of war. Moloch, the stunned governments. Moloch, whose mind is pure machinery. Moloch, whose blood is running money. Moloch, whose fingers are 10 armies. Moloch, whose breast is a cannibal dynamo. Moloch, whose ear is a smoking tomb. Moloch, whose eyes are 1,000 blind windows. Moloch, whose skyscrapers stand in the long streets like endless Jehovah's. Moloch, whose factories dream and croak in the fog. Moloch, whose smokestacks and antennae crown the cities. Moloch, whose love is endless oil and stone. Moloch, whose soul is electricity and banks. Moloch, whose poverty is the specter of genius. Moloch, specter of genius. Moloch, whose fate is a cloud of sexless hydrogen. Moloch, whose name is the mind. Moloch, in whom I sit lonely. Moloch, in whom I dream angels. Crazy in Moloch. Expletive deleted in Moloch. Lack love and manless in Moloch. Moloch, who entered my soul early. Moloch, in whom I am a consciousness without a body. Moloch, who frightened me out of my natural ecstasy. By the way, this sounds to me like a description of, real quick, I'll interject. It sounds to me like a description of the delusion. So if you think about Moloch as the delusion itself, being described by Allen Ginsberg, who seemingly would have been aware of the true nature of if whether or not he himself achieved this true knowledge of self, was at least would have been intellectually aware of these things, right? So Moloch, who entered my soul early. Moloch, in whom I am a consciousness without a body. Moloch, who frightened me out of my natural ecstasy, hinting at the true nature, by the way. Moloch, whom I abandon. Wake up in Moloch, light streaming out of the sky. Moloch, Moloch, robot apartments, invisible suburbs, skeleton treasuries, blind capitals, demonic industries, spectral nations, invincible madhouses, expletive deleted, monstrous bombs. They broke their backs lifting Moloch to heaven. Pavement, trees, radios, tons, lifting the city to heaven, which exists and is everywhere about us. Visions, omens, hallucinations, miracles, ecstasies, gone down the American River, dreams, adorations, illuminations, religions, the whole boatload of sensitive bullshit, breakthroughs over the river, flips and crucifixions, gone down the flood, highs, epiphanies, despairs, 10 years, animal screams and suicides, minds, new loves, mad generation, down on the rocks of time, real holy laughter in the river, they saw it all, the wild eyes, the holy yells, They bade farewell. They jumped off the roof to solitude, waving, carrying flowers, down to the river, into the street. And if that's not an accurate description of this fucking hell realm, I don't know what is. Sounds to me like everything that's happening outside of myself. Sounds like it's probably my, I'm, by the way, not into poetry at all whatsoever. And what I mean by that is, generally speaking, poems do not, like, I've tried to read Walt Whitman or whatever. It just doesn't appeal to me. That's pretty much the only poem that's ever, I found something in it that attracted me, right? Surprise, surprise. Yeah, there's a lot of truth in that, even if I wasn't, able to apprehend the truth, at a conscious level. Mm. But it's all right there. Just Googling what the fuck is Moloch, right? I Googled, I think I Googled Howl Moloch, meaning the poem. Let's go back. Yeah. What does Moloch mean in Howl? Moloch appears as a pagan idol in the book of Leviticus, to whom the Canaanites sacrificed their children. Again, in a thought experiment, the idea of, people in a so-called truth community intentionally having children, is that not in some way sacrificing their children, to or into Moloch? If Moloch is, if what Ginsburg, described, if that's what Moloch is functioning as, isn't that what's going on here? Right. So that means I was sacrificed by my parents, right, on some level to Moloch. But it's not it's not the idea of, oh, we're putting them to death to venerate an idol, right? It's like, no, it's even worse than that. We're giving, it's to give, it's to turn over, or to transmit, or to offer up, right? Sacrifice, by the way. What is sacrifice? A sacrifice is to offer up. To sacrifice is to offer up and say, here, take it, and to do with as you will, right? A sacrifice. So is this not on some level that you were sacrificed, if you're willing to view it in this way? I was sacrificed to this concept or God that we can refer to as Moloch, right? Like, that's what has happened here. That's what is happening here, and what continues to happen. And that is the delusion, by the way, or it's at least, a large part of how the delusion functions. But again, the most super intelligent force of love possible can't fear being offered up to Moloch. And if the most super intelligent force of love possible understands, well, if my essence, it would know, well, if I go into a delusion that involves, a Moloch's machine, right? And then if I'm now humanity, let's say that I'm all of the individuals that comprise humanity in one mass, right? And if each one of those individuals is in fact the delusion, right, is the idea that it's possible to break off a piece of that indivisible force, and then now it's here having these individual experiences. And again, the Alan Watts or a notion from philosophy, isn't that exactly what the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest levels of vibrational energy might perhaps be drawn to do, to a limitless, an entity or force that can't experience limitation except perhaps via delusion, right? Or what? Antithesis, right? The inverse of its own nature, perhaps. So again, it makes logical sense to me how or why or both, why all of this would have happened. But it's via the what? The inverse of the proposition, right, would be via the, the delusion would function as an inverse, right? Antithesis, right? The antithesis of the thesis or proposition. So now we're offering up to, demonic, destructive, not we, but now it is the offering up of what? The cream of the crop, the spiritual innocence, right? The most super intelligent force of love possible. Love comes to town in the form of a baby, and then in very short order is offered up as sacrifice to Moloch, right? You'll never convince me that that's not what's happening, at least on some level, right? That is what's going on here. So, again, Moloch appears as a pagan idol in the book of Leviticus, and this is, again, metaphorical, right? The idea that the Bible is largely metaphorical, right? Moloch appears as a pagan idol in the book of Leviticus, to whom the Canaanites sacrificed their children. Moloch is also a demonic industrial figure in the film Metropolis. In the poem Howl, Part 2, Ginsberg merges these allusions to produce a signifier for a monstrous entity that threatens to devour human consciousness. By what? By this process of subversion, because it can only do that through an inverse means of convincing within the delusion, right? The individual, which is in some ways the result of a delusion, right? An ongoing, unfolding series of delusions, right? That is in some way this human experience, it seems to me. It's to subvert or convince to subvert in an inverse fashion via Moloch, right? To refuse with a rebellious spirit, perhaps, as the Adamic race potentially, if the Bible's to be believed, descended from, Adam and Eve, the original rebels, right? And again, probably largely metaphorical, but, again, how much of this do I really need to bring home, right? I would say a person of average intelligence would be able to follow this. Now, yeah, they can be skeptical all they want, but I'm only talking about the ability to intellectually comprehend what the fuck I'm saying. Whatever happens beyond that is none of my concern, right? Clearly, I'm clearly operating on higher levels than what I'm able to convey, intelligently, right? And not to brag, just, clearly I'm where I need to be within my own space in this moment in time, which, doesn't even necessarily exist. So I mean time within the delusion, right? The delusion of time, the delusion of space, the delusion of a place, right? The delusion of America, so we can go back and read. We could probably go back right now and read. So let's watch what I'm going to do. I think this is going to be instructive. I believe this thought experiment will bear fruit. Give me just a moment. Howl Moloch Part 2. This should be instructive, although maybe it won't. And this is me taking a chance, right? I'm playing a hunch here, so let's do this. Although I might have already forget what. Okay. What sphinx of cement and aluminum bashed open their skulls and ate up their brains and imagination? Delusion, solitude, filth, ugliness, ash cans and unobtainable dollars, children screaming under the stairs, boys sobbing in armies, old men weeping in the parks. Delusion, delusion, nightmare of delusion. Delusion, the loveless, mental delusion, delusion, the heavy judger of men, delusion, the incomprehensible prison, delusion, the crossbones, soulless jailhouse and congress of sorrows, delusion, whose buildings are judgment, delusion, the vast stone of war, delusion, the stunned governments, delusion, whose mind is pure machinery, delusion, whose blood is running money, delusion, whose fingers are 10 armies, delusion, whose breast is a cannibal dynamo, delusion, whose ear is a smoking tomb, delusion, whose eyes are 1,000 blind windows, delusion, whose skyscrapers stand in the long streets like endless Jehovah's, delusion, whose factories dream and croak in the fog, delusion, whose smokestacks and antenna crown the cities, delusion, whose love is endless oil and stone, delusion, whose soul is electricity and banks, delusion, whose poverty is the specter of genius, delusion, whose fate is a cloudless, sexless hydrogen, delusion, whose name is the mind, delusion, in whom I sit lonely, delusion, in whom I dream angels, crazy in delusion, lack love and manless, and he means manless in a sexual sense, in delusion. So lack love and sexless in delusion. Let's correct that to what Ginsberg meant. Delusion, who entered my soul early. Delusion, in whom I am a consciousness without a body. Delusion, who frightened me out of my natural ecstasy. Delusion, whom I abandon. Wake up in delusion. And by the way, wake up in delusion is that's clearly the idea that this is the dream world, and that what we think of as the dream world, Crazy Horse style, is in fact the real world. Light streaming out of the sky. Delusion, delusion, robot apartments, invisible suburbs, skeleton treasuries, blind capitals, demonic industries, spectral nations, invisible madhouses, monstrous bombs. They broke their backs lifting delusion to heaven. Pavements, trees, radios, tons, lifting the city to heaven, which exists and is everywhere about us. By the way, there's your heaven or hell realm manifesting as a hell realm. Lifting the city to heaven, which exists and is everywhere about us. Interesting. It's almost like they have to tell you the stereotype of that. Visions, omens, hallucinations, miracles, ecstasies, gone down the American River, dreams, adorations, illuminations, religions, the whole boatload of sensitive bullshit, breakthroughs over the river, flips and crucifixions, gone down the flood, highs, epiphanies, despairs, 10 years, animal screams and suicides, minds, new loves, mad generations, down on the rocks of time, real holy laughter in the river. They saw it all. The wild eyes, the holy yells, they bade farewell. They jumped off the roof to solitude, waving, carrying flowers down to the river, into the street. That's it. I think there's a part 3, but anyway. How about that? How about that, partner? So the half measure of the chatter just out from yesterday, it's the unwillingness. What it is it's the willingness to identify within oneself with all of the things listed in that poem, right? So each individual aspect of the delusion that Ginsburg is referring to identify within myself with any of that is to be captured or ensnared within Moloch with no way to escape, because the only way out is to go within myself into what? The kingdom of the most super intelligent force of love possible, which even that poem itself accounts for, right? The poem says, I'll have to go back to it, but here's what the poem said. Hang on, because I can't even remember what it said. Give me a second. They broke their backs lifting Moloch, or the delusion, to heaven, meaning the idea of a strong America, the idea of make America great again, the idea of, well, God's in control, the idea that, we're actually here to have an enjoyable, peaceful experience by creating a proper society, right? Bullshit, by the way. No, how is someone who's already been sacrificed to a delusion, that metaphorically is the concept of Moloch from the Bible, right? See, this is, what are we even talking about here? But he says they broke their backs, meaning humanity killed themselves. By the way, what does it mean to break one's back? It means to toil and struggle in a business sense of labor, right? To make Moloch great, to make America great, to make systems of man great, to then offer them up to heaven to say, look at what we've done here, right? And then so he says heaven, he says lifting the city to heaven, and he capitalizes heaven, lifting the city to heaven, which exists, meaning he's saying, I'm describing hell. Basically, Ginsburg is describing the hell in which we live. And he's saying, well, heaven exists and is everywhere about us, right? Meaning beyond time and space, right? It's all right there. But when I read this and heard this, and in fact watched an entire movie about it starring James Franco, that broad from Weeds, and John Hamm, right? And is everywhere about us, right? So the fact that Allen Ginsberg is able to be described in specific terms and has nothing, by the way, surprise, surprise, Moloch's machine presents you these ideas and says, well, here's a human called Allen Ginsberg. So if I try to talk about Moloch, at some point, somebody's going to figure out that I'm also referring to a concept from an Allen Ginsberg poem. And then the listener can say, well, Allen Ginsberg was a PDF homo J. Okay, well, I guess that means that I wasn't offered up to Moloch because Allen Ginsberg was a homosexual, PDFJ on record, right? So fucking what? Who cares? What's that got to do with the validity of what does that have to do with manifested truth? Right? Nothing. It's a convenient way to seek to negate the validity of truth that can't be negated. It can't be invalidated. If I can manifest it, and if it is manifest, if it's made Moloch's machine is about making it where it will never be manifested, the actual truth. See, Moloch's machine is set about to make it to where there will be no manifesting of heaven. That what did Ginsburg say? Well, it's everywhere about us all the time, right? It's there, right? It's there. Which not that it makes it okay, because I've always been, not a fan of the demonic, Baphomet, just whatever, type of imagery has been going on. But all of these death metal T-shirts and people mobbing around with satanic imagery on their clothing and on their vehicles, right? It's like, isn't some of that, some sort of coping with, because again, at a subconscious level, at the level of symbols, everybody knows that this is Moloch, right? Everybody knows that. There's nobody who's not aware of that because of how our conscious mind. And again, I can't prove this. I'm asserting this, meaning I'm willing to. It's debatable, and I would potentially be willing to defend this position. That's what this. To be specific, that's what I mean when I'm making this assertion. Right? That I'm saying this because it seems to me like, based on how our subconscious minds operate at a symbolic level, everybody knows this somewhere deep down. That's what this is, what this life is on some level. But then again, my essence. So true knowledge of self is to understand, yes, and none of that can touch me unless I, at a level of what could be described as sin, but not in a moral sense, if I commit the error of missing the mark, meaning to fail to correctly identify within myself in any given moment with my true nature, which is greater than any of this, which transcends a concept of Moloch, which transcends a process, which actually can't do anything but transcend all of this, which means you can offer up what we know our children to be to Moloch all you want, and all they're going to do is transcend it, meaning the spirit or essence within our children, Nancy Pelosi's mocking idea of the MS-13 divine spark or spark of divinity, to offer that up to Moloch is to say, well, as long as it is what we say it is, Moloch can't do nothing to it anyway, so have at it, partner. That is the delusion. That is the delusion that you were born into and I was born into. If you are, in fact, a discrete being that's, the same thing I am, and I suspect that you are, or you wouldn't be here listening to this. Right? So stick that in your gallows humor pipe and smoke it, EBT. Shout out to Enslaved by Truth. Put that in your gallows humor corn cob pipe and smoke it, buddy. How about you? I am that one. The damn Deep South produced individual after individual after individual after individual, and you're listening to the one motherfucker who came up out of that like a motherfucking phoenix rising from the ashes, and eventually through his own hard-headedness and commitment and competitiveness. And I'm not supposed to be humble about any of this. I'm not supposed to be humble about this. You're listening to the one motherfucker out of millions who figured this the fuck out and got to the point of trusted and waited and practiced and trusted and waited and practiced, and then finally love came to town in the form of true knowledge of self. And here I am, just foolish enough to convey all these ideas to you folks via Alphabet, Google, YouTube's help, hidden this time and place, which doesn't even exist because it's a delusion within a delusion, within a delusion, within a delusion, within a delusion. Fractals of delusions. Fractal delusion, right? Fractal delusion. Who wants to live in a fractal delusion? I don't, but here I am. Meanwhile, what I am can't be bothered about. Oh well, here I am in a fractal delusion. Well, okay, but what I am can't be killed or destroyed or defeated by a fractal delusion, unless I'm unwilling to properly identify within myself with my own true nature. So what's there to fear or worry about? Nothing. The only thing to fear is fear itself. Bam, mic drop. And can't even fear that. That's a symptom. When I experience fear now, I'm aware of it right away because of my meditative practices. And make no mistake, folks, I'm not going to be humble about this. I'm one of the most badass meditators of all motherfucking time, Jack. And I was falsely humble when I was talking to that Nachiketa about them 10-day retreats, meditation retreats. I could do that shit standing on my motherfucking head, partner. I could do that shit standing on my head, but I let his modesty rub off on me, and I was falsely modest about it. And I know he's done several of them, and I'm sure he's a high-level meditator. I'm not here to negate or belittle anybody else's experience, but if I decided to, I'll go do one of them 10-day retreats, and it'll be a fucking piece of cake. That's how badass of a meditator I am. It is what it is. I'm not going to be humble about that. I'm not supposed to be humble about that, right? Now, I firmly believe anybody else could get to that level. Anybody else. But it's going to take years and years and years and years. At this point, I've exercised that muscle of meditation to the point where I'm pretty much meditating most of every day, just without even trying or thinking about it. I'm in a meditative state most of every day for years now. Yippee skippy yay for Benton. But I'm not going to go out here and pretend like I'm not that badass motherfucker. I am that badass motherfucker. I'm not going to pretend like I'm not, right? It's not my identity. I'm not, a yogi now, and there he is sitting cross-legged at the park, although I might be, right? Who cares? Who cares? What I would like for other people is for them to also get to that level, right? But I know this, I probably never would have had love come to town in the form of true knowledge of self if I hadn't have, about coming up on 4 years ago, stopped eating all the bullshit food, meaning any of it, right? And yeah, some of what I'm eating is adulterated. I'm about to eat some apricots. There's probably some chemicals in there. It says no BPA in the can. Who the fuck knows? Whatever. It's almost 4 years of doing the absolute best I'm capable of only eating real actual food, right? All this started, by the way, you know how this all started? Do y'all know how this started? It started by me learning that atomic iodine could potentially decalcify the pineal gland, and I started taking atomic iodine. And then I had started having mental problems that I don't even like to describe because I don't like to say out of my own mouth things that the system could use against me. But I can't fear Moloch's machine using things against me. So it doesn't even matter, right? A person who was previously able to function in society at the level of employment and having a wife or a girlfriend and, having a whole bunch of friends, right? And being successful in a bullshit Arkansas view of what success looks like on some level, although not fully, because I went to university but failed to graduate, although I could have if I wanted to, right? Certainly capable of it, but and then went into a white collar job at some point and all of this, and had a house and a mortgage and a wife and whatever, on some level, the American dream notion of success, right? Who cares? What's it matter? Um, but what I'm getting at is, by the time I got to ex-wife number two, she was into some of these, more alternative ideas to some extent. Spiritually, I was attracted to it, and it's in my astrology, by the way. People can poo-poo astrology all you want. It's right there in my birth chart, that he's going to be attracted to, these type of ideas and these type of practices and these types of paths, right? And it's, in fact, some of it says, I might even have these abilities to reach, and I don't even view it as some exalted level. It's just my own ability to tap into myself. But, you know, he at least will have a propensity towards possibly being able to do some of these things. It's in my fucking birth chart. If a bunch of, new agey frou-frou, you know, types of people, bohemian types of people are to be believed, right? Yeah. Sure, why not? And when I talk about millions and millions of people, you know, had a chance to escape what they were born into in the deep south, look at what percentage of them are going to be eliminated solely based on, you know, the type of culture and people that these ideas would be attached to, your hippie types. Pine Bluff, Arkansas, that's why sometimes I call myself half a hippie, half a hippie. Pine Bluff, Arkansas is not capable of producing an actual hippie, right? So I'm already, look how much I'm limited just by the fact that a lot of these ideas can be attached to bohemianism at all, right? People like the Beat Generation, Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, the hippies, right? That was born out of, the hippies was born out of the Beat Generation and, what was it called? Beatniks, right? That all came out of uh, people like Allen Ginsberg, which, of course, that's some version of a psyop or CIA or government programming. Of course it is. We all know that as so-called truthers. We know that. That's child's play to understand all of that. You guys don't need me for that part. Most of you could probably teach me something about it, you know, if only to remind me of things I've already forgotten, right? Like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, I remember. So what you gonna tell me? And I don't mean you, I mean the royal you. Like, what's anybody gonna tell me? Not much. But who am I? What am I gonna tell? Right? And what is gonna happen? Here's where the exponential nature of things comes into play. If I'm again a preacher, a born preacher in some ways, and if I was to just identify myself in the context of Moloch's machine, it would be preacher, right? That's does seem to be my most basic, most effortless function. Is that's the thing I'm able to do, right? It more or less comes naturally, and then of course growing up in a way that actually early and often enhance those abilities, right? Public speaking and all of this, it makes total sense. So why wouldn't I, in the short term, I'm doing what I need to do to put myself in position to, fulfill to as much as possible, fully embody and bring forth my purpose to be of service. And then the exponential or ripple effect is after the words leave my mouth within this delusion of delusion upon delusion upon delusion, and then other beings experiencing their own delusion upon delusion upon delusion within delusion, Moloch, right? Moloch's machine. Whatever they do with it, that's the exponential potential, right? And how many times have I said I'm very pessimistic when you lump individuals into a mass? I'm very optimistic specifically when it comes to the transcendent potential of an individual. That's the exponential factor. Exponential, right? Meaning the dictionary definition of the word exponential. That's the possibility for the most super intelligent force of love possible for me to make that manifest. And then through my performance, right, in these delusions, that it could That's something that could catch fire, right? Right. And something could be born out of that, another phoenix rising out of the ashes. And that's none of my business. That's none of whatever comes out of that. Once those words escape my lips, and this is the word of God, by the way. Once the word of God, once the word of the most super intelligent force of love possible escapes my lips, that's not my business anymore. That's not Benton's business, right? That's not the limited human Benton's business. That's the business of my essence or nature. So it is my business, right? It's the true business, right? It's the business of manifested truth, right? The trust, right? What I am is only able to trust that what comes out of the dissemination or the expulsion or whatever you want to call it, the utterance, the expression of the word of the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level, it cannot return void. It can't fail. It can only expand. It can only grow and conquer all. Another mic drop. See? And do you see how all of these concepts I'm talking about, it's obvious and, dare I say, common sense when approached from the proper perspective, or more correctly, a very specific perspective or perspectives. It's all right there in your face. If only you are willing to listen to a super high functioning retarded person, me, or maybe to, you know, access some of that yourself and just say, well, yeah, I guess I will just look at some very basic fundamental ideas from the Bible and from the dictionary and from a poem, right? As I've illustrated so far, and society itself, just at a very basic fundamental level, right? And by the way, in the Bible, God, the God of the Bible, right? The creator in the Bible, working with what? Very basic fundamental concepts to create humanity. We're talking about dirt. We're talking about soil, right? We're talking about breath, right? Uh, You know, going from memory, the idea of forming the human body from the dust or dirt and then breathing life into Adam, right? And then taking, again, it's probably metaphorical, but then Eve, taking Adam's rib and then Eve being constructed out of that. These are very basic fundamental ideas here. So again, image and likeness, right? Image and likeness of the Most High. If that's what I am, created in the image and likeness of the Most High, the highest levels of vibrational frequency possible, right? And then that force breathing life into me. Breathing what into me? The most super intelligent force of love possible. That's the creation of the delusion. I just solved the motherfucking mystery right here. You're welcome. That was the creation of the delusion. That was the creation of the delusion. That's where it started from our perspective as limited humans. It was the most super intelligent force of love possible for whatever reason that I'm probably not meant to fully understand, and that's okay. Maybe I will fully understand it. I don't know. But that's what that breathing life into us, right? Or to Adam. It's again right there. It's right there for anybody to figure the fuck out. If they can overcome what? Themselves, who've been sacrificed from day one to motherfucking Moloch, a pagan god, right? In the context of the Bible. But who wants to have been sacrificed to a pagan god? Well, what's that got to do with it? If that's in fact the reality, who cares how an individual feels about that? By the way, that's a big part of Moloch's machine. Moloch's machine would understand at the level of your humanity, you're going to be concerned with how you feel about the fact that you may have very well been sacrificed to this machine. You're going to feel some type of way about that, right? Of course. So your own humanity and your own nature being used against you from day one to prove, in an attempt to disprove a proposition or thesis. Because the most super intelligent force of love possible would seemingly have to understand, well, I can breathe life into this basic fundamental, something I've constructed from a basic fundamental piece of material within a delusion. Here's the breath of life into Adam. There's nothing to, I'm not even, and again, can't fear what might befall humanity as a result. And then, Book of Job style, hey, have at him. Have at him, enemy. Have at him, antithesis. Just don't physically touch him, right? In the metaphor of the Bible, which is probably also literal. Have at him. Have you considered my servant over here? So, thesis, right? Thesis in the book of Job, God, and it talks about the sons of God came to, present themselves unto the Lord, right? To, in a military sense, perhaps to be inspected, right? And then Satan also came with them. Antithesis, the idea of an antithesis, the embodiment or personification of the antithesis of God, which would be the proposition or thesis in this scenario. And then thesis looked at them and observed that there was the personification or embodiment of the antithesis. And he said, hey, antithesis, what's happening? What are you up to today? How are you? And antithesis saying, hey, you know me, just out here roaming to and fro, seeking whom I might devour, trying to find something I can disprove the validity of via humanity. Hey, great. Have you considered my servant Job? Is that not the entire plight of humanity? And then the antithesis saying, oh, yeah, he's your shining light. He's your greatest servant, blah, blah, blah. Of course he is. You've multiplied him. You've given him everything. Let me have a shot at him. He'll curse you to your face, partner. Okay, I'm the most super intelligent force of love possible. I'm the proposition. I'm the thesis. I know who and what the fuck I am. So, just don't physically do anything to him, like directly, but meaning take away. Inverse, again, inverse. You can take away what I've given, right? The blessings I've bestowed, but I'm not capable of lacking trust in his ability to express his own nature, because if he doesn't express his own true nature, he wasn't that nature in the first place. Meaning, if I am the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest levels, I already know that I can't be defeated. And if I can be defeated, I wasn't that in the first place. So what's there to fear? In fact, I can't fear. So have at Job, thus perhaps creating a Moloch, right? I don't know. Is that how it works? I don't know. Again, thought experiments. Thought experiments. Well, yeah, and we can bring it to a little bit of, I like gossip, Razvan, and I'm not saying you're gossiping. I'm saying I like gossip. All this delusional talk reminds me of Jack and Tommy. One thinks he's stopping wars. The other believes he's rich and going homeless for God. Yeah, I mean, and I haven't followed what Tom's been up to. Never meet your heroes. And again, I'm saying that tongue in cheek as far as hero, but uh, never meet a high level artist, and that you like their art, right? I guess that would be more correct, but it's interesting, yeah. And then but Razvan, and I'm agreeing with you, by the way. It's going to sound like I'm not, but isn't that further proof of a lot of what I'm talking about here, which is their creative force that never lies dormant, if what you're asserting is true. And it's not entirely delusional. Some of that, by the way, they are breathing life into some of that for themselves, right? They are creating their own realities that are real in some ways. Look at what both of them are doing, by the way. Human beings, right? If that's not just AI, if those are real people, and I believe they are real people, because I believe Tom and Jack have both met some of these folks that are fans of their channel, right? So both of them, and this is narcissism in a way, if you think about it, both of them are creating delusions, right? Although not entirely, it's not entirely delusional, but both of them are creating delusions and then in some way breathing life into the delusion, especially by getting other people to at least in part sign off on the validity of some of the delusion, right? I mean, that's what's happening, right? And what does that result from? It results from, them either knowingly or unknowingly allowing their own creative force, which never lies dormant, to give birth to all of that. And look at how many people are happy to engage with that, and myself included to some extent in the past, right? To some extent. While simultaneously, I don't like to think about this necessarily, but most likely creating my own versions of delusions that I was living in, right, at the time. And not to say that of course, I'm not completely, I also fall victim to the delusion at some point, even now, but it's less and less. And I'm always able to reframe now that I have this true knowledge, now that I'm able to access and have had this, let's be clear, now that I've had this experience, love coming to town, this true knowledge of self, it's a technology I'm able to use to reframe, to properly approach things at the level of my creative force, to reframe perspectives and how I'm approaching situations, to very quickly get out of the space of my of the subversion of my creative force, moment to moment. See, and that is the practice. That's what I'm talking about. Like this is, it's not simple necessarily to get to this point, although it could be. I mean, maybe I'm just so hard headed and autistic and obtuse that I had to go the long way around. Maybe I took the long way around, and there's much shorter paths to what I'm talking about. But this was certainly my way and continues to be my way. Um, yeah, and I by the way, I declare victory. This is victory, spiritual victory via spiritual surrender. Right? No spiritual surrender equals no spiritual victory. But anyway, I got to get out of here. It's almost time to. It's going to be time to go in and do my shopping really soon. So appreciate everybody being here. I'm pretty proud of it. I'll put my name on it. Thanks for watching. Bye.